Harmon High Good, renowned Indian killer in the flesh. Many of our readers at the Shasta Courier are in awe of your diligence protecting the citizens from the depredations of the Red Devils. Many say that your cry is as familiar to the Indian as their own wound. But on a recent trip to our country, the scientist William Brewer reports he witnessed you and volunteers, quote, indiscriminately killing all the wild Indians they could find, male or female.
Whoa. I'm a God-fearing man, from Ohio originally. I want to tend my ranch in peace, but the diggers frequently steal my corn and raid on the law-abiding citizens. I can't stand by that. I've come to learn the only good digger is one that's dangling at the end of a rope or has an ounce of lead.
Many do say that annihilation is the unfortunate fate of the redskin. Does this notion seem true? What reports can you tell of tales of you on the front of the Indian Wars?
Well, our last battle was back in November of this good year of 1862. We were campaigning in the region of the Pitt River, where the Indians are an especially pugnacious group of savages. We tried to burn their wigwams and stores for the winter, to drive them out of the country for good, yet they're strikingly stubborn in their desire to remain in these lands. When we came to the village, we laid in wait till dawn, when the diggers are most vulnerable.
That Yale professor says that he saw you and the other militiamen driving the Indians away from their hunting grounds to make way for your ranches. Then, when the Indians steal cattle to fend off starvation, that you come on with a hailstorm of bloodshed. Why, today I saw 8 scalps hanging from your horse's saddle, and rumors are that there are 40 more red scalps hanging from a poplar outside of your home.
Whenever my men have captured squaws and their children, we made sure to find them good and proper Saxon homes. These treacherous savages have brought death and brutality to many of our good citizens. When history is written, I will be remembered for protecting the innocent against these depredations. As our first governor, Burnett said, a war of extermination will continue to be waged until the Indian race becomes extinct.
Find a seat. Owie, why aren't you joining in our reenactment of the Pilgrim Feast? Most students usually love this time of year.
It's all we. This isn't how we dance. I don't even know what this is.
Well, you know, not all Native Americans dance the same. Don't take this so seriously. This is supposed to be a fun activity to celebrate the fellowship between the Pilgrims and the Indians.
Our dancers have flicker feather bands, and our headdresses are made of eagle and woodpecker feathers. These are just ugly.
Owie, how are you ever going to get by in this world if you take offense at every little thing? You know, the Pilgrims had to escape religious persecution in England. They traveled for over 65 days. That's almost 2 months across the ocean till they reached Plymouth Rock. And with a little help from the Indians, they developed a thriving colony where they could have religious freedom. And they even helped bring civilization.
And the Wampanoag was the tribe that helped them there.
Right. The Pilgrims were totally ignorant about America, but with hard work, they did start a prosperous colony where they could have religious freedom. And they did help bring civilization to the Wampanoag.
You saved the New World, but it wasn't even new. Natives were already here, in Pelein Boss. That's our place in Wintu.
You know, the Wampanoag traveled over 2 days to feast with the Pilgrims. They even helped them build shelters, and they hunted venison for the feast. Come on, Owie, don't you want to follow the spirit of the Wampanoag and be cooperative and thankful?
Grandpa, it was so bad. I hate school and I'm never going back.
Oh, let me guess. Did another classmate find out that you were Native and tell you how her grandmother was a Cherokee princess?
You're crazy, Grandpa. Well, Aunt Louise, what are you doing?
Well, my perfect little niecey, I'm working on this sash that your grandmother made. It has some of our old Is-a-wee designs on it. So many of our people dropped out of high school. When you walk across the stage, we want everybody to know how proud we are of you.
Oh, Saksui, thank you, Auntie. It's beautiful. Today in school, the teacher turned the class into a hipster music festival with all these fake headdresses. They did a hecka stupid Thanksgiving dance, and Miss Rodriguez said my name wrong again.
Owie! I got an owie.
She said I should be thankful, but the whole thing was really annoying.
You have a lot to be thankful for. You attend ceremony, you sing our songs, you're learning our language. Not too long ago, our people were killed for that.
But you shouldn't have to participate in that nonsense. The fact that the schools still do these Thanksgiving theme is just shows how little they know about us natives.
Billy asked if I lived in a teepee and if I was related to Pocahontas. Colors of the wind? I'd like to show him the colors of my fist.
Well, the truth about Pocahontas, she was 11 years old and she was kidnapped from her family and she was married off to John Roof. And of course, Disney made it into a romantic cartoon.
A lot of these stories you'll hear in school about natives aren't true, like the books that call us primitive hunter-gatherers, or describe us in the past tense like we do not exist anymore. Remember, when you hear about people talking about things like sustainability or restorative justice, they're talking about natives. Our ways are ancient, but they're a big part of our future.
Miss Rodriguez tried to tell me that the Pilgrims brought us to civilization.
The truth is, we had civilization all along.
In the beginning, or relatives, deer, eagle, salmon, wolf, coyote, grizzly bear, even the little flyers were here before us. We were the last to be created. We have maintained our responsibilities to the lands, to the waters, and each other. We did not seek to destroy our relatives, but looked to them for teachings and blessings. The wolves instructed us about family ties, loyalty, and love. The beavers taught us about building homes and making people welcome. The rivers ran cold and free and ran black with salmon when they returned to spawn. As the salmon nourished us, the forests and the waters, we danced and sang for them. The forest fires were tamed. We allowed the trees to grow old and used prescribed burns to create grazing grounds for the deer and elk. The burns drove down pests and helped create bounties of acorns, which we made into soup.
We were the first scientists using the knowledge of our land and ecosystems that had been passed down from generation to generation to keep our world in balance. More than 100 indigenous languages were spoken in California before contact, and our languages are interwoven with our philosophies and beliefs that English neglects. Before colonization, we had 9 bands of Wintu, the Yana people, as well as 9 bands of Achimawi and 2 Atsigewi bands. We would defend our territories, but we were a peaceful people. When the first white people arrived, some thought they were Yapatu, ancient people who lived in our world before us. Many of us welcomed them and tried to help at first.
We lived in houses made of cedar bark, and every village had a headman and council of elders. Prior to colonization, women and men had different and important roles, but they weren't rigid. Women's power to create life is known as a vital force in our societies. Our lands, rivers, and sacred places still lift us in times of need. But deforestation, the dams, the mining, and the ranching destroyed places where we trained our healers and where people went for blessings in times of despair. Our histories, like our rivers, have been choked by dams. Behind the dams, our rivers grow hot. Mercury and toxins roll in poison algae blooms. Just like our waters, our history is sick. The dams on our history bring the poisons of ignorance and stereotypes. They hold back the currents of truth and justice that will heal us all. Today, we continue the journey to know our true selves, where we have been, and how we will move forward, unified and in peace. Today, the history of Shasta County shall be undammed.
This project is vital to understanding how Father Sarah started the mission system that stretched from San Diego to Sonoma. He and the Padres traveled over rugged terrain with limited supplies. Many of the men grew sick, tired, but they never gave up. They called on their faith to keep them going. And they found many native people, and they turned them into faithful Christian neophytes. And they taught them many things: how to mend clothes, how to read and how to write, how to farm, and they built all this out of wilderness.
My dad says the missions were horrible, and I should be allowed to set my mission on fire. If they had built missions in Wintu land, we would have burned them down.
Don't you guys have bigger problems to worry about, like all the drugging and drinking you guys do?
Whoever thought of this project must have been on drugs.
That's rude, Billy. I saw on the news that Native Americans are really upset that the Pope made Sarah saint. I want to know what that's about.
Okay, settle down, everyone. Now, Jesse, you and Allie will have to do the mission project just like everyone else. There are no special accommodations in this class. Furthermore, Billy, I am sure that drinking and drug problems are not relegated to any one group here in Shasta County, unfortunately.
They don't even say anything about natives in the book, just that some died from disease. There aren't any pictures of them unless they're wearing mission clothes.
This writer thinks the natives like being slaves.
Okay, you guys, our schedule will simply not allow for these disruptions, especially with these new Common Core standards. And Jesse, if there is one more rude outburst from you, I will send you to the office. Now, perhaps the Padres didn't do everything perfectly, but, you know, if they had never come to California, Aoi, don't you think the native people would have had an even harder time adjusting to the modern culture?
Well, I guess. I don't know.
You're so modern, Allie, especially when you're doing Indian witchcraft in the woods.
Shut up, noob!
Don't be a jerk, Billy. I've seen pictures of some of the ceremonies in the paper. I wish I could go to one.
Okay, quiet down, everyone. Now, Allie, if you have no further objections, we will go on with our research. And Billy, you have a detention after school, and Jesse, that was just one too many. You Go to the principal's office now.
Oh man, this is like the bad Indians getting whipped at the missions.
Jesse!
You won't believe what happened in school today. Billy called me a witch, and Miss Rodriguez said we wouldn't be able to read without the missions.
Oh, I'm sorry, granddaughter. You know, it's a hard time to be in schools now, too. You know, years ago we tried to get a supplement when the state was adopting some California social studies books. But the teachers' unions voted it down because they said it was would cause the non-Indian kids psychological effects. You know, and I think looks like they don't care about, you know, how you feel about these things and the effects on us from this traumatic history that's untold. You know, but we're going to keep fighting for justice in that system.
Everyone stares at me and Jesse. They're waiting to see what we're going to say. But even though I know the mission project is dumb, I can't explain it.
The missions didn't make it up this far, up here to Northern California. The history of the mission Indians were treated like slave plantations. The Indians worked harder from sunup to sundown and were forced into Christianity. They tortured the Indians and the death rates were horrendous. More than 80% of the California Indian populations perished.
Yeah, what's disturbing is that the Indians had more rights under the Spanish law than when California became a state.
So things got worse when California joined the United States?
We couldn't own property or vote. We couldn't even move around without a pass that proved that we worked for a white man. They looked at how our lands, they took all our lands at that time.
Indians were not recognized citizens until 1924. It was like 84 years ago, when Congress voted to grant citizenship to U.S. Indians. It was lost by one vote. And the Johnson-O'Malley Education Act wasn't until 1934. That was allowed into public schools.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, at first they said the Winnemem and other Wintus were too Indian to be citizens. Now they say we're not Indian enough to be federally recognized. Maybe it's not legal anymore to kill Indians, but the laws still don't do much to protect us and the destruction of our sacred ways. Having no rights makes it so hard for us to protect our ceremonies, you know. Yeah. And these sacred sites will be destroyed by the Shasta Dam raise if that comes about like the dam did in the first place. You know, the Pit River tribe has had to fight for over 20 years to stop the fracking at Medicine Lake, even though it is federally recognized.
Right. The Indians were not citizens until 24 years ago, when the Museums and Schools Act, like we're all gone, like we don't exist. It leaves the impression that people think we look like that and believe our cultures don't exist.
I never understood why the Pit River tribe is recognized and the Wintu aren't.
It really began with the unratified treaties in 1851. The Yana and Wintun leaders signed the Cottonwood Treaty. It would have provided a 35-square-mile reservation, including the east side of Redding.
Wait, so Waterworks Park could have been a part of your res?
Well, I don't know about that, but the federal recognition is a big form of discrimination, mostly based on what the tribes had in land and reservations. When they took all the Wintus off the list in the mid-'80s, it was easier because we had no land. Unrecognition is a discriminatory term. Maybe the UN DRIP will help.
The treaties terminated the rights of tribes of their homelands, and we were forced to relocate, sacrifice a lot of our lands and natural resources for pennies. But having a reservation might have prevented some of the horrors that followed for generations.
How come the treaty wasn't passed?
Wollstonecraft and the other Indian agents would only negotiate with Indians. Indian men, because that was their way. Who knows what Wollstonecraft's interpreters told them, what was actually said. We signed with an X because we spoke little English or no English at all, and we understood nothing of English.
Major Redding, it's so generous of you to have offered your lovely estate for this momentous treaty signing. May I ask how you came to own such a lovely piece of God's unspoiled country?
It's my pleasure. Dr. Wollstonecraft, I want to welcome you to Redding Ranch. I arrived here many years ago, 7 years ago, after much toil and travel and losing many Indians to the Pitt River, who took my horses as well as my servants. This is all that remains from my original expedition. I noticed that the local Indians are much different than the prairies, being passive and non-aggressive in manner. I was quite certain when I settled here that I could make them as industrious as the Southern Negro is for the plantation cotton growers.
Strange you say that. I am but a physician from the East, and I am new to these Indian affairs as a newly appointed federal Indian agent. But I find the diggers most troublesome. Most recently, my men and I traveled far up the McLeod Fork of the Pitt River, where we were able to find a few of their leaders. And yet, before we could obtain a proper interpreter, they escaped, much to my dismay. I only continue these blasted treaty negotiations because the Indians cannot be subdued by warfare. The rugged terrain forbids it.
Our readers, who are in the vicinity of the Indian troubles, are skeptical. To place upon our most fertile soil the most degraded race of aboriginals of the Northern America is planting the seeds of disaster. It would be far safer for the Saxons if they were moved outside of the lines of the state.
Troublesome though they may be, the Indians we speak to are full of fear. They say that if a head of cattle goes missing, they face violence as if they had murdered 20 men. I believe the Indians shall consent to this reservation, not because of our generosity or our powers of persuasion, but because they seek protection from us, from the whites.
I employ a great many friendly Indians. This season, we are harvesting an unusually large crop of watermelon. So I propose a feast of my melons to the local diggers to establish harmony among the races.
Our people were being killed all the way to the 1900s. Women and children were being taken as indentured servants and slaves. Our leaders barely understood how the U.S. government worked, but thought that the treaty would help protect them from complete extermination.
Exactly. Wollstonecraft and the other Indian agents only negotiated with Indian men, because that was their way. Who knows what Wollstonecraft's interpreters told them, what was actually said. We had to sign with an X because we did not speak English and we did not understand English.
The state of California leaders didn't want to give up the land after stealing it all, and the free Indian labor. After the miners came, the settlers came. They wanted to clear all the forest and blast all the mountains looking for copper and gold and other resources that contaminated the waters. This greed continues.
Yes.
So the U.S. senators of California begged Congress to unanimously reject all the 18 treaties and lock them away for over 50 years in Congress.
Yes. Leaders from Pitt River country never signed the treaties. We didn't have any recognition of a settlement until the 1950s, when the Indian Claims Commission recognized our rights to the 100-mile square of our ancestral homelands. That is from Round Mountain to Mount Shasta, to Goose Lake, to Mount Lassen, and then back to Round Mountain. That the BIA sold us out and got away with paying a mere 47 cents per acre instead of giving us our rightful land.
After the 18 treaties were unratified, they also said we weren't worthy of holding land or have government protection. That was when the mass murder of your family and our villages could happen as easily as the next breath. They could make more money killing Indians than mining for gold at that point. It was such an awful time. When you're older, we'll discuss more of these things that happened. It could, you know, it's that time where there were over 300,000 Indians in the state, and it was reduced to 20,000 by 1900s. So it's a terrible history, but you know, we're going to support you and help you and be here for you, carrying our Indian ways. So you have that.
If you have any questions, always come and find us, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So open your AP U.S. history books to chapter 14, the territorial expansion of the United States. As we talked about, our expansion west was driven by the belief in manifest destiny, that it was God's will that we spread democracy and American values across the land.
Expansion? More like invasion of our lands.
Jesse, in 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall discovered gold in the riverbeds of the Sacramento Valley. Gold fever quickly spread, and our population would boom over the next few years. And in their quest for gold, prospectors would clash with the Native Americans, and it would set the stage for long-lasting tensions.
So you're saying it was like war? The stories I've heard from elders don't really describe it that way.
Yes, there were wars, Indian wars here in Shasta County, because the settlers and the Native Americans could not forge a peace. There were attacks on villages that many call massacres, but usually it was because the Native Americans would steal from the settlers and sometimes kill white women and children out of revenge. Now, this assignment, and it's often seen as really fun, is a creative writing one. You are going to write a create-your-own adventure story that is historically accurate but using fictional characters that you create.
Wait, so is there a choose-your-own-adventure story for trying to be an Indian to kick the invaders out of your land?
Jesse, didn't we just have a talk with your parents about disrupting our lesson plans? I think you will find there were atrocities on both sides. But what's fun about this assignment is you can choose whoever you want to be. You can imagine what it was like to be a Native American during this time.
I have heard of stories of natives fighting against settlers because they were trying to capture our women and children. But I've also heard of stories of natives attacking settlers because of our women's ceremonies.
Oh, great. So we're going to be taught by the relative of the people who murdered our families and children?
Jesse, I am the great-great-granddaughter of Lieutenant Crook, but he was a very brave man and was one of the military heroes of the Indian Wars in Pitt River country. But, you know, those were a long time ago. We should let the past be the past. I don't hold any grudges. Lieutenant Crook was a very brave man, and he was just trying to protect his countrymen. He spoke very highly of the Native American warriors that he fought and their courage. And if you disrupt our lesson one more time, I'm going to send you to the principal's office. Aren't you one citation away from a suspension?
Yeah, because Principal Noose wouldn't give me excused absences for ceremonies, but Billy got extra credit for writing about his family's dumb trip to Disneyland.
Walt Disney actually created a billion-dollar business and contributed something to society. What's the point of a ceremony? The long hair and feather skirts make you look like a bunch of girls.
Shut up, you racist noob!
Stop it, Jesse! Jesse, all the way to the principal's office now. Billy, you're staying here for detention.
What's up, niece? It's not like you to get into fights. I thought I told you not to act like I did when I was in school.
Oh, geez. I was just trying to break it up. And as usual, the Native kids get in trouble for something we didn't even do. Jesse was just trying to tell the teacher how inaccurate our Gold Rush book is. And then one of the boys called him gay. And you know how Jesse is.
Yeah, I understand. When I was in school, the teachers used to tell the Native boys to cut their hair. They didn't understand the history of the boarding schools or how hard it was for them. They cut their hair, and they didn't understand how spiritually violent that was for them. Not to mention, they kidnapped the kids. They took them away to a strange place, and then they beat them for practicing their language or practicing their culture and speaking their language. The idea was to kill the Indian and save the man. It's sad.
Yeah, I can't imagine living or growing up without my family, or even so far away from my homelands. I have heard the phrase, kill the Indian, save the man, but what does it actually really mean?
Well, government officials had decided that it was cheaper to educate and assimilate the natives rather than trying to kill us all off. That was after the extermination policy that was enforced in California. I might have mentioned was paid for by state and federal funds. In Old Shasta City, militiamen were paid $5 a head and $1.25 for our scalps. They say that in California before the gold rush, there were more than 300,000 Indians, but only 30,000 by 1860.
Oh, so that's what Aunt Colleen means when she said that Indian killing used to make a good living.
Yeah, one of the worst massacres I learned about around here was the massacre on Kaibay Creek in 1854. Kaibay used to be a big hunting village on the McCloud River where the Winnemem Wintu hold the balaschonas for the young girls out there. They say at the time that all the men and boys had gone on a hunting expedition. Yeah, the militias had said that some Chinese railroad workers had been killed down on the Sacramento River, and the white militants wanted revenge. They just went up the McCloud River. They didn't even care that the Winnemem had nothing to do with it. They didn't care whose head they had. They just wanted to get paid. So sad.
Buck in the quarter, boys. Let's get out of here. Tonight the drinks are on me.
Yeah, they hunted them all day and night. One of my great-great aunties on my dad's side had survived that massacre by hiding in the river. And I heard that she had said that 200 Wintun were killed. There was also a state law called the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. This allowed the white settlers to sell Indian orphans, and adults too, for that matter, to the highest bidder. If they didn't kill the women in the massacres, they would take the women and the young girls and sell them into slavery or make them concubines. Apparently the 49ers presumed we were promiscuous because of our traditional dress. So sad. You still see that same type of objectification today with the sexy Indian maiden outfits people wear at Halloween time. It's shameful. But let me just tell you this, niece. Despite the massacres and despite the slavery, despite the boarding schools and the dams, we're still here and we survived and we're strong. And our long hair is a sacred way for us to honor the strength of our ancestors.
Well, Your choose your own adventure stories were excellent. But the California presentations on historical events that still affect us today have been even better. I'm really, really excited that you guys have gotten so into this assignment. So today is our very last day and our last presentation. So first up is going to be Awi.
I take your spot. Lieutenant George Crook was described by William Tecumseh Sherman as the greatest Indian fighter since Andrew Jackson. He actually thought more highly of Indians than he did of other soldiers, because he said natives fought in order to stem American aggression, lust, or greed. But he followed orders, because settlers complained we were fighting back. So he led a campaign of extermination in Pitt River territories during the winter of 1856 and 1857. Usually attacking at dawn, he laid waste to village after village. Even though we often receive payments in cattle or beef, if he seen them in our villages, he would consider us thieves and kill us. During the summer, Crook and his men were stalking a village of Pitt River Indians. Looking for information about the size of the village, he had captured an Ajamai woman and her infant at gunpoint. Later that night, Crook and his men were preparing a surprise attack on the village, but the Pitt Rivers had moved their camp to the opposite side of the creek. When the men were distracted looking for a place to cross, the woman had set down her infant, slipped underwater, and out of sight. Moments later, the fires in the village went dark. The villagers fled. I will never know the Pitt River woman's name, nor her child's, but she haunts my thoughts and my dreams. Did one of my great-great-grandparents live in that village? Would I not exist without her sacrifice? How can we have museums, towns, mountains, and even national parks named after murderers, and I can't know her name? This unfairness, it crushes me. It makes me feel like I'm invisible. Next year, I'm going to major in American Indian Studies at Haskell Indian Nations University because I want her story and others like hers to be told. Our history shouldn't idolize mass murderers. And
that's enough, Awi. I think you've made your point.
But I didn't finish.
Jeez, I didn't know it went down like that.
You did some excellent primary source research, but why are you trying to make us feel bad about things that happened long ago?
I didn't write this to make anybody feel guilty. I wrote this for me.
Just please sit down and stay quiet. Your paper feels like a personal attack on me and my family.
I'd like to hear the rest of it.
Well, there was white people who tried to help, and it just wasn't the times.
That's enough, Awi. Your paper, it's just too much. Just give me those.
But it's right here in Crick's own journals.
Give those to me. We've heard enough about how terrible the Indian Wars were.
Oh, Miss Crook Johnson, where's Jesse?
You hadn't heard? I heard he withdrew from school. He turned 18 last week.
I saw him before school. He said he was headed toward the river trail.
He dropped out? Jesse!
Creator, I'm worried about my cousin Jesse. He takes in the pain of his ancestors and can't let go. I pray you ward off all evil from him. Let him hear and see the good things. Let him remember the good people in his life before the bad things he's taken inside grow too big and too painful. Help him see the light our people have always found, even in the darkest of times. Oh.
Oh, Jesse.
Cousin, it hurts. Thank you for finding me.
Never give up. We're in this together.
There you go, my granddaughter. I'm so proud of you. You know, an educated Indian is a dangerous thing. And I sure hope these wonderful things that we have made for you to pass on our traditions, the presentation of this eagle feather, in no way interferes with your graduation ceremonies today. Unlike locally, that Anderson student last year, how his diploma was held up, I hope what we give you today does not interfere. And I hear even Big Valley School up in the next county is having issues with the natives having these things. I hope they interfere in no way with your graduation today. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I read the journals, and they're horrifying. It's disorienting, like the ground beneath me has turned to quicksand. What you wrote was so heartfelt, and I was so crude. I don't know what to say, and I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. But all I want is for people to tell the truth. And I also want my ancestors and myself to be seen as human beings.
Billy Whale. Natty West. You're going to have to take those off, Howie. There are no accommodations for special adornments for your graduation code. Lovely as they are, many students don't have the time or the resources for such accessories. If I let you walk, what's going to happen next year? Somebody show up with a Taylor Swift t-shirt over their gown. It just is unfair to give you special privileges.
When I tell people about the history of the genocide our people survived, some people say they feel guilty or it's too horrible to face. And I think of the Ajamali woman who sacrificed her child to save her village. There are so many heroes like her who have been hidden in the footnotes of history, whose deeds and names need to be discovered. Every native who kept a song or language alive every native who kept ceremonies going underground. They are heroes. Every settler who provided a safe haven from massacres, every native who survived a boarding school, every linguist who helped record our languages, every native who kept our medicines alive, they are heroes. Every native who learns their language, every native who dances and sings at a ceremony, every native who still dreams, every native who builds a canoe, every native who stands up for a sacred site, they are all heroes. Like raging waters of an undammed river, our people's stories flood us with resilience and courage. Our history reminds us that the forces of fear, shame, and greed can be survived and eventually overcome together.
Yes, together. Congratulations, Ollie.
Thank you.